Hey, I'm Steve DiOrio. I'm the Executive Director of the Revenue Enablement Institute. Today, I'd like to talk with Jeff McKittrick. Jeff is our Managing Director of Digital Sales Platforms. And I particularly want to talk to him about research that we've done on virtual selling and the findings of our remote sales productivity study. Jeff, how are you doing?
Doing great, Steve. How about you?
Great. Jeff, I really want to hear what you have to say and what you've learned. To set the stage for the audience, I want to share a little bit about what we learned in this study. Basically, the coronavirus has displaced sales teams based on work-at-home rules that are now extending into 2021, and in many organizations, 50 are becoming permanent. The net result is sales productivity has dropped 20% as sales organizations struggle with learning how to sell remotely. With all this disruptions, organizations that we talk to are feeling pressure to do two things. One, train old school face-to-face sellers in new school remote selling tactics. That means new playbooks, new tools, new strategies, new skills. Second, they want to train faster to move at the speed of the market and adapt to the faster operating cadence of remote selling. So Jeff, the first obvious question is, how was all in your dozens of conversations with sales leaders in the last couple weeks, how are these leaders going to do all this training when face-to-face training is off the table and when budgets for travel, training, and sales support are being cut?
It's a great point, Steve. And in fact, here's some of the data that we share about what's going on. It's probably no surprise business travel has fallen off a cliff, if not completely. And of course, to your point, the training has also had budget cuts. So a couple of things that we observe. One, training is going to happen virtually. We know that, or maybe not at all, right? Training may not be a focus for a lot of folks. It may be one of the first things they put pause on. It's going to have to leverage technology. And by technology, we're going to talk in a bit about it's more than just Zoom, Teams, WebEx as to how you're going to deliver, but you've got to completely rethink how you're going to deliver and reinforce that training. And it's going to have to do more with less. As we see the training budget cut, often, through my connections through Sales Enablement Society and in talking to these sales leaders, unfortunately, hard realities are being taken that either they're cutting the budgets for the content, but in some cases, even laying off entire departments and reducing sales enablement staff, sales support staff as well. So it's going to have to be a more with less and rethinking how it's delivered.
Wow. The other problem we learned is that when we interviewed sales teams, they're struggling with remote training. In particular, they're not very good at coaching and doing product demos remotely. In fact, they ranked last year.
That's right. It's a totally different world for teams that are used to traveling together, sitting in customer lobbies, sharing a rental car, breakfasts at the hotel before the meeting, and all the other things that go along. It's not a natural behavior, and in today's world of back-to-back meetings, everything being virtual, plus juggling homeschooling or the other challenges of working from home, it's not a priority, and the sales teams aren't doing, and the management aren't doing a lot of that coaching and guidance, right? It needs to be done as a priority. And then secondly, we're used to doing product demonstrations, often, hardware demonstrations in particular, are things that you do on site, right? You read the room, you react to the customer. It's an entirely different way now to, how are you going to do an effective demo and how are you going to differentiate yourself versus all the other vendors that you compete or are trying to get mind share with the customers. You have to have a killer demo, something a little more tailored that really grabs the attention of somebody who, that you're trying to sell to that, oh, by the way, is also sitting at home and has all the distractions and the back-to-back calls that you do as a sales team.
Wow. Well, another disturbing finding from the study I'd love you to talk about is not only are they bad at coaching and virtual ride-alongs, but they're admitting that they're not able to leverage AI and advanced analytics to improve accountability and reinforce training, which I know are so important. What are you hearing here?
Yeah, even before we get to AI and the advanced analytics, just having the basics of the reporting together, right, is something that a lot of companies struggle on. Is how do they understand the seller effectiveness really, right? A lot of that is gut or in the ride-alongs that you're actually going along with it or looking at quota performance. But how are we really going to use data and start to look at machine learning and AI that starts to predict what's really going on when you're not face-to-face or walking by the sales desk or in the sales office with folks. So there's a big difference there, and it's how do we show up and how do you measure that effectiveness now. So it's really transformed it, but a lot of companies have not taken that leap to actually either one, investing or making it cohesive so that a sales leader could use it, and two, they haven't built in the reinforcement and the leadership culture that actually expects that. So one, it's around the seller behavior, but two, have they worked together with marketing and the other systems that effectively show us what is this buyer intent? Often these data sets that would drive these types of informed, that would inform these kind of decisions are sitting in different silos, different functions, and it's a challenge that organizations haven't necessarily connected the dots so that you get the full picture of what's going on.
Wow, Jeff. So lots of headwinds here. I got to ask the question, how are sales organizations adapting? How are reps adapting? And specifically, how can technology help?
Well, of course, technology could certainly be a big part of that. And it's great. You'll see this piece of data here that really says, how could we better? The survey pointed out for us, I'd love to have better visibility in my sales activity. And hopefully that doesn't mean I want my sales rep to spend a lot of time manually banging out a lot of information, putting it into a CRM, and then somebody having to go try and run a report. But how do I capture all the types of things that go on? How many meetings are being scheduled? What actually took place in the meetings? Are people advancing a deal? Or are they just having a nice to have chat with a customer? Are they focusing on the right things? And that goes along with the, how do we tell that the buyers are actually responding to what we're doing? The forecast accuracy, and then the pipeline health. So the traditional things you do to measure a sales team, but now more than ever, the technology is critical to that, and also connecting together what you see. So getting a holistic picture of what's going on, not just your traditional pipeline review and forecast and what's in commit and what's in upside, but how do you get new signals around what's going on that, because you're not traveling with your sales teams or necessarily sitting in those sales calls.
But Jeff, obvious question, isn't a lot of this technology already in place? I mean, don't people have LMSs, sales enablement, sales AI in place?
They do, Steve, and that's a really interesting point. But to what I said earlier, people own a lot of this stuff. What they haven't necessarily done is connect, how it comes together in the whole holistic system, and how it is used for not only how do I train, how do I coach, how do I use all the tools that are surrounded around a sales motion or a buyer cycle that's going on. How do I measure all of that in a holistic picture? How do I reinforce and change behavior and coach back off of that? So imagine a learning, typically a sales enablement function or a learning and development team owns the LMS. Are they traditionally incented for, how does that translate all the way down to, does the salesperson apply the techniques or the content that's been applied and actually used it in seller meetings, and has a sales manager actually watched how that was actually used and coached and reinforced, like, hey, this sales rep isn't particularly on message, they need to go back and do some more training or leverage some of that. So it's disconnected frequently. Different teams have different metrics and how they're looking. So to really be effective with this, you have to look at it holistically and say, it's not just about the skills that you want. The skills even have to reinforce, what are the tools, the content, the next best plays? How do you use that in the context of a sales cycle? How do you then see what are the sellers doing with it? How well is the market responding and your customers responding? Is it actually helping deals move faster? Are you doing better against competitors, et cetera? And then how does all of that get retrained back in and closing the loop to what's the next best thing to train and reinforce for the sales reps?
Jeff, when you present it like this, it's brutal common sense, particularly this process. Why is it so hard to connect these dots in an organization? And specifically, who owns this process that you've outlined here?
That's probably the $64,000 question, if you will, Stephen. The who owns it is often either nobody owns it or multiple people own it. Therefore, there's not a focus on this to bring it all together. You could say this is a sales ops problem. You could say this is a sales enablement problem. Sometimes those are in the same function. Some of this is content is delivered by a marketing team. There's a learning and development team, maybe aligned to the corporate. There's, of course, a lot of stuff that goes to all of the systems. So it really requires taking a bigger, more senior level leadership view at this to say, how do you align everybody around common metrics, common understanding of what needs to be done, and how do you get this visibility into it? So it is absolutely a culture and a leadership shift to take the tools that you probably already own and bring them together in the way that delivers on this.
Wow. So, this is incredibly simple at 20,000 feet. What I'm taking away from this is by integrating, knowledge and skill development with sales enablement, with AI and accountability, I can achieve 6 things. Reinforcement in the context of day-to-day selling activities and actual sales. Accountability by using AI, as you point out, for evaluation and feedback, particularly in a virtual setting. You can execute virtual role plays that allow reps to practice and get feedback quickly and remotely. You've also then closing the loop with accountability measures that link adoption, training, application to actual performance measurement. Sales managers have visibility to all the adoption and behavior here. And this appears to be very scalable in terms of fitting into the day-to-day workflow, sales processes, and leverages, most importantly, existing sales enablement assets and technologies that are sitting around. Where can people learn more about this?
Yeah, Stephen. So one, we've got a link for you to get the report, get the very detailed information of all the rest of the sentiment of what's going on with sales leaders, as well as our recommendations around this. Many of the graphics you saw here are in that. Or two, just reach out to us as the Revenue Enablement Institute, rei.com, and we'd be happy to come and advise. We've got an expert faculty that has lots of depth, lots of experience in actually implementing these, practitioners as well as thought leaders in this area. We'd love to work with you and help solve some of these problems that folks are facing in this challenging times.
Thanks so much, Jeff.